Hello, and thank you for joining me today. This is Eric Perkins Artist, and today we will be doing a review of the Gencrafts Premium Acrylic Paints. Before we begin, I would like to point out that Gencrafts is not endorsing, sponsoring, or even approving of this review, so you are about to get an absolutely honest review of the product. The particular box that I am reviewing today is a 50 count box of 22 milliliter tubes. The box contains 5 trays, each tray containing 10 colors, and the set contains a nice range of colors from yellows and blues and greens, along with some black and gray and even some brown tones. Now, the box also has a color chart on the back side of it, which lists each color along with the alpha code that has been assigned to it. And those alpha codes and names are also present on each of the tubes, so it's very easy to identify which colors are which. This alpha code and naming convention is an important aspect of the product, because a company that cannot reproduce their colors will not name or assign codes to those colors. Unfortunately, after doing some research, I found that you cannot purchase individual tubes or to replace colors as you run out of them. So if you will need to replace a specific color, you're going to have to buy an entire set, and I believe the sets come in 24 and 50. But one of the nicest features is that this color chart on the box seems pretty accurate to the colors, and so I can skip the step of making my own color chart, as I've done with several other products in the past. Now, rather than testing all 50 colors out of this set, I'm actually only using 11. So mainly the colors I'm using are in the blues and the violet, but I used a little bit of yellow and red. So I kind of sampled everything except for the greens and browns in the painting that I'm going to do. And so those 11 colors are used in my test here to show you what each color looks like, how it lays down, and, whatever properties we can discern about the paints outside of actually creating a painting. So first of all, I swatched each of these 11 colors and went from as opaque as I could make it down to sort of like a wash, without really putting a lot of effort into creating a wash. So you get a fully saturated color and then slightly lighter as it thins out. After creating those 11 swatches, I went ahead and painted a black line across each of the swatches, going vertical. This we'll get back to in just a few minutes once it's dry. Next, I'm going to demonstrate the blending capabilities of the paint. So I create this blend from Naples yellow to deep yellow, crimson red, and then violet. This is a quick little thing to show you how well the paint can blend, and of course you can achieve even smoother effects with additional layers, glazing, other techniques. Just doing it very quickly, this actually looks pretty decent. Next, I attempt to create some type of value scale. I want to see how well the color can be transitioned from a pure color to a faded color, or a lighter value of that color using white, and a darker value using black. The base color I'm using for this value scale is Aegean blue, and so I lay it down pretty heavily, and then I apply a little bit of white over it and try to blend it together, and then I do the same thing with the black. Now, as you can see, the white just kind of mucks things up and makes it a little bit muddy, whereas the black quickly overpowers the blue, and I don't get a whole lot of value range. So creating a value scale with this paint is a little difficult. It'll require some effort, but it can be done. Alright, in this last box, this is kind of a mess. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but what I ended up doing here is just kind of showing you the difference in the difference in coverage between one color and another. So as I swatch these colors down, this is like one dip into my paint. You'll see that the light colors, whether they're light in the value, light in the saturation, they don't really spread very far, whereas my darker, more saturated colors spread a lot more. So it is worth noting that light colors will not cover as much of an area as a darker color when you're using the same amount. So it'll take less pigment with a darker color, more pigment with a lighter color. Okay, now we're going to go back to those black lines that I drew across the swatches. The purpose of those lines is to show you how well these colors will cover over something when we lay a coating over the top of it. So we're starting with the Naples yellow, working our way down, or actually starting with the white, working our way down through the list. And you're going to see right here that, again, the light colors are more transparent than the darker colors. The dark colors are more opaque, with the violet and the violet and the Prussian blue very nearly completely cover that black in one coating. Whereas, of course, black does cover black in one coating, or you can't really see the line anymore. But the more saturated and darker the color, the quicker it covers. White did almost nothing. My light ultramarine color did almost nothing. So it's worth noting, lighter colors do not cover with this paint. It is very transparent, whereas your darker colors are more opaque. And this is kind of one of those things where I think this is this is one of the defining characteristics of a cheap set of paint. Cheap paints basically create lighter colors with less pigment, and because there's less pigment, they are more transparent, whereas your darker colors are made with more pigment and more opaque. I had already created the painting before I did this test for this particular video, so I already knew what I was really looking for here. So what we've discovered so far is there are a lot of colors in this 50 color set, and they have a great range of color. Each color has its own name and an alpha code, which is important. So that's a big plus. You can identify each color quickly and easily. Another good thing was that I got relatively smooth blending between colors. But now let's talk about the negatives. First of all, the varying opacity and coverage. The second really big bad part, sets only. If you're going to be seriously painting and you're going to be creating multiple pieces of art, you're going to run out of one color, whatever color it is that you use most often. And when you do that, you don't want to have to buy 49 more colors or even 23 more colors just to get the one that you need. Alright, so looking at this objectively, I have one more good point than I have bad points. So 3 to the good, 2 to the bad. But let's go through the process of creating the Dark Messiah. And at the end of that painting, I'll give you my final verdict on whether this paint is good or bad. As I mentioned earlier, I am only using 11 colors out of this 50 color set. And those 11 colors represent most of the colors within the set. The only things that I don't really use are grays, greens, and browns. Now, we're going to start a ways into the painting. This painting began as a 1-week project. It was for the 4th week of training to use my right hand for art. If you really want to see the full process at the beginning, go ahead and check out my Becoming Right-Handed Week 4 video. So you don't necessarily have to go there. We are going to go ahead and scroll through the slides of the first 8 sessions that led up to this point, which covers that entire week of painting. During the first 8 sessions, which are being cycled through right now, I sketched the painting in black and white. Then I began coloring with basically laying in base colors for everything. And then I ended up changing some colors as I go through the process, but adding details, so we get through these 8 sessions that are, again, all included in my Becoming Right-Handed Week 4 video. We're going to take up from session 9 in this video. Now, I will point out that during these first 8 sessions, one thing that just kept coming back to bother me was that the light colors have very low opacity, whereas the darker colors have deeper opacity. So I ended up finding that the most successful way to use this paint was to mix a light color with a slightly darker color that would have a good amount of pigment in it, because it would give me a good amount of coverage. But the other thing I learned was apply my paint thickly and try not to smear it around or smooth it out. The asteroids that you will see that make up the diamond-shaped portal opening behind the character, those asteroids are created using golden molding paste. So those are not Gencrafts acrylic paint. They're not, they're literally molding paste. Okay, one more observation that I have at this point already is that the Gencrafts paint is very glossy. It's far more glossy than most acrylic paint, and it also feels different. Like if you touch the dry paint, I would say it feels more like latex. At one point I was actually afraid that that it was latex, like liquid latex, and like if I took my nails and dragged them across the canvas, that I could literally peel the whole painting. Now I don't think that'll happen, but I'm also not going to test it. I begin session 9 working on the wing bones. Okay, so the character has demon wings, and these wing bones are kind of jointed and acting as a sort of support or whatever. Maybe the wings unfold more than what they are. So I'm working on adding highlights, shadows, and base colors to these wing bones and kind of defining them right here. At this point, and I have decided that the main light source for the painting is the globe of the Earth, which the figure has in his hands, and so I'm using sort of a blue color, which is actually the Aegean blue. That is my main light color, but the portal is the backlight, and so it is casting sort of like fiery orange, red, and yellow lighting to the receding edges of all objects in the painting. Next up, I begin to define the figure's horns and his chitin cowl or shoulder piece. So it's meant to be chitin, which is like bug carapace armor or whatever. So, but I wanted it to be very chunky and textured, and so I'm kind of trying to put highlights and shadows throughout that piece to make it look lumpy. And so as you can see, by this point, most of those initial sketch lines from the very first layer of painting have been pretty much completely covered. There's very few of them left, and alright, now we're going into session 10. And this session begins with detailing and defining the big ridges of the wings. And I wanted these to look like wrinkled flesh with, like all wrapped and wrinkled, and maybe like having tendrils of it that come down around the joints and the bones, and of course like a big wrapped knob up at the top and on the outside where the bony protrusions come out that are kind of like little horns or talons or whatever. And it was during this painting session I decided that I wanted to use more of a blue than a violet. Now in this stage you could see a lot of glare. It's partly because of how I had the camera positioned, but here you're going to see a lot of that glare that I mentioned, that this paint is very glossy, so you get a lot of reflection. Photographing it was very difficult, and again, most acrylic paint is not this glossy. Alright, continuing with the wings, I move on to working on the interior, which is meant to be semi-transparent flesh. So because it's semi-transparent, I want to suggest that there is kind of like the fiery golden light coming through the skin, you know, like you're seeing that portal behind the wings. So all my yellowish coloring kind of works, you know, in a sort of a diamond pattern, which is the shape of the portal behind the character. And so to work this color in, I'm using a mix of tones, and I've tried using the white to lighten things up, which of course doesn't work very well. But using Naples yellow and deep yellow, along with, I believe, a little bit of the mauve pale, which is that pink color again, and just kind of working that area in, trying to get it nice and light, and but trying to keep it just a little bit less light than the actual burst of color coming around the character's head from the portal. I'm using the mauve pale and the violet and the Prussian blue for the darker, deeper parts of the wings, like right around the bones, adding definition there, and along the underside of the wing ridges. Alright, session 11, I wasn't quite happy with the chitin, the cowl piece, or the elbow pads that the character's wearing. So I start by redefining those a little bit, or trying to touch them up, make them look a little bit more knobby or gnarled and textured than what I had initially. Next, I've gone and redefined the hands, so I lay those in, and I've resketched them and laid them back in, and then, you know, I kind of work around the hands, like with the edges of the sleeves, and then I come back to the hands again. I had to give it a few minutes to dry, and then I'm adding a little bit more light tone, and, you know, just kind of working things up a little bit at a time. And in this stage, we're nearly done with the painting, so I'm kind of jumping all over the place right here, trying to touch up things as I go along, as I see them, or as I remember that they need to be worked on. Next, I add in the continents to the earth. So the earth is now white with these green continents on it, which looks a little bit weird. And then I go ahead and do a little bit more definition on the fingers, making sure that they're separating from the earth. And then I jump down to the chitin belt, which up to this point I had it pretty much like non-visible right below the earth, and I wanted to bring it back out just a little bit, so I'm working on the texture there, trying to make it match the elbow pads and the chitin cowl. And lastly, off camera, I made a few more adjustments. My video became corrupted on one of these files for some reason, but one of the big things I changed was I changed the robes from blue to violet, and I did that using the mauve pale, violet, and Prussian blue, and of course I started off with light washes and then added more like thick applications of paint to really punch it up and get that color that I wanted. And I changed the color because the blue robes and the blue skin just felt like too much blue. Alright, now we're getting into session 12, which is the final session. And so I was still not happy with the elbow pads. They were actually looking a little bit too smooth, like a little too planned out, like I'd blocked them out into chunks or whatever. So I went through and I touched those up a little bit more, changed the bright spots, the dark spots, you know, breaking things up a little bit more, making them look a little bit more textured and chunky. Now this is when I decided it was time to bring in more of that Aegean blue into the earth and basically color in the oceans, because the white glow just was too much. So because I only used a little bit of green in this painting, I went ahead and mixed it on my own. I believe it was usually using the Naples yellow and the Aegean blue. But again, there's only a couple of things. There's the continents on the earth, and I believe one of the planets in the background. And since this is the last session, just like in the 11th session, I'm kind of jumping all over the place. I'm trying to make all those last minute adjustments and just kind of bring everything together right here at the end. Next up, I target the bony protrusions that are coming out of the wings. They were looking a little bit weird to me, so I went ahead and colored those a little bit more. I worked on their highlights and shadows and just kind of tried to make them match the horns and the fingernails a little bit more. So I worked on the character's eyes a little bit more, and that's one more area where I had just a little bit of green. So of course yellow and I believe Aegean blue again. And then I set about reworking the planets. The planets were very flat and boring looking to me, so I went ahead and added more shadow to them, kind of like creating the dark side of the planet, giving it a little bit of rim lighting. On the one in the bottom corner there with the clouds, I wanted those to look more like clouds than just streaks on the thing. It kind of reminded me of like candy or something, you know, like marbled candy. And so I just wanted to touch everything up and make it look better. Next, I go on to work on the asteroids. Up to this point, I've actually been referring to them as space raisins because I colored them in with this ugly violet mix of colors that to me resemble raisins. So again, I'm going with the lighting setup that I've got, or that I've established throughout the painting. I'm using a light blue for my main light source side, so anything that's maybe catching the light directly is getting light blue. I'm using orange or deep yellow, which is kind of an orange color. So I'm using the deep yellow for sort of the main base tone, using Prussian blue for some of the deeper areas, the darker areas, and violet, and then adding maybe just a little bit of Naples yellow and deep yellow to the back edges to kind of pop things out again. Off camera, I added a few more stars to the background, touched up some of the ones that were there. Then I signed my name, and unfortunately that little bit, for whatever reason, like I said, the video file got corrupted or whatever, and I could not save it. The last thing that I did after all of that was to coat the edges of the canvas so that those receding edges along the sides are fully painted with black, violet, and Prussian blue, just kind of mixed on there. And I think I had to do a little bit of touch up across the edges of the painting anywhere that I went over, and kind of messed up my space background just a little bit. In the end, I believe the painting took me somewhere between 20 and 40 hours to complete. Now for the final verdict on the Gencrafts Premium Acrylic Paint. I am really happy with what I was able to achieve. I mean, I like the painting, I love the colors in it, but this painting should not have taken this long. And the reason that it did take this long is because the paint is not good. I would not recommend this paint. In fact, I would suggest that for anywhere from $5 to $10 more, you could get a very comparable set of better quality acrylic paint that will do a much better job. So ultimately, I found the paint to be very difficult and tedious to work with, specifically anytime I was trying to lighten an area and the lighter colors had no opacity, so I could not cover, and had to do layer after layer after layer just trying to get things to work. And I personally do not intend to use this acrylic paint again as long as I have other options available to me. I like the vibrant colors. I like that the colors do blend pretty well. I like that there are good color choices in the set. What I don't like, the inconsistent opacity, the high glossiness of the paint. If I wanted to replace a single color out of the set, I can't without buying a whole new set. So the final word is, if you're on a tight budget and this is all you can afford, you can use it. You can create art with it. But you're going to put the effort into doing so, because it is not an easy medium to work with, and there are better options that literally only cost a few dollars more with far better quality. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do like it and share it with your friends. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you to all of my patrons. You can become a patron by joining me on Patreon at patreon.com/EricNMIPerkins. To help support my channel, you could also buy my 2020 art book, which is on sale on Etsy for $20. There are other products available in my Etsy store as well. Links to my Etsy store, my Patreon, and my other social media are in the video description. Thank you so much for your time. I do hope you'll be back for the next video. Until then, take care.